So negotiations are underway between Golden Boy Promotions and K2 Promotions for what could be the biggest fight in boxing that you could make right now between Saul, Canelo, Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin. There's a lot of moving parts to this negotiation. There's a lot of information to absorb. I wanted to break it down for you guys category by category, give you some insight, give you the lowdown. I'm Michael Montero, and this is the straight dope on Canelo-Golovkin. Let's start with the WBC situation. Now, Golovkin won the interim version of the WBC middleweight title back in 2014 with his destruction of Marco Antonio Rubio. Miguel Cotto, was the full titleist when he beat Sergio Martinez. He didn't want to fight Golovkin. He paid Golovkin some step-aside money to go after a much more lucrative fight with Canelo Alvarez. And he ended up dumping the title anyway. It was only on the line for Alvarez, but Canelo won that fight. He became the full WBC middleweight titleist last November. So then Canelo's people, Golovkin's people, the WBC, they all sat down earlier this year, came to an agreement that both fighters will be allowed to have an interim fight. Should they be successful in those fights, Canelo would have to face Golovkin in his very next fight or he would be stripped. Now, Golovkin last month decided to take on a mandatory challenger for one of the other titles he holds in Dominic Wade. Scored a destructive second round knockout, kept his title, he's good to go. Last week, Canelo Alvarez took a voluntary fight against Amir Khan at 155 pounds, and he scored a knockout of the year candidate in the 6th round against Khan, so he's good to go. This Monday, May 9th, the WBC mandated a 15-day negotiation period between both camps who are in talks. Oscar De La Hoya actually called Tom Loeffler Sunday after the Canelo win against Amir Khan, and they were supposed to talk several times in the week following that. So if they can't reach an agreement by May 24th, then the WBC would have what they call a purse bid hearing. Now here's the thing about a purse bid. Usually with a titleist and a mandatory, if an agreement can't be reached and it goes to purse bid, the titleist gets a significantly higher portion of the purse than the mandatory. 75, 25, something like that. Different organizations have different splits of the purse, but it's generally in that ballpark. But since this is between a titleist and an interim titleist, the split would be 55-45. Which you have to figure Golden Boy Promotions and Canelo Alvarez want no part of because their guy is the much bigger draw, the proven moneymaker in this scenario. Which brings me to my next category, A side, B side. Canelo Alvarez has fought several times on pay-per-view, 4 or 5 times now. The first time was with Floyd Mayweather a couple years ago, and that was a good, very successful, profitable pay-per-view card. It did well over 2 million buys. His fight with Cotto last November did almost 1 million buys. So Canelo's been getting 8-figure paydays lately. This fight against Amir Khan last weekend, we don't know how much it did as far as sales, probably won't crack 500,000, but Canelo's still getting an 8-figure payday. Now you compare that to Golovkin, who's only had 1 pay-per-view fight. He hasn't had that fight against a guy like Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao, or a big name to propel his name in the sport. He had 1 pay-per-view fight last October against David Lemieux. It did 150,000 buys, and that's straight out of Tom Loeffler's mouth. You've heard different figures from different hacks in the media, but it's 150,000 buys. It was a tough sell. A month before, Floyd Mayweather fought on pay-per-view. A month after was the Cotto-Canelo pay-per-view, so it was a tough sell. Did 150,000 buys. You look at the last payday Golovkin had against Dominic Wade. He was guaranteed 2 million and then maybe got a little bit of TV upside, but that was it. He's never had anything remotely close to an 8-figure payday. So Canelo has been making more money for several years now, and he's been doing a lot of it in Las Vegas with higher gates, which brings us to ticket sales. Now, Canelo and Golovkin are probably the 2 biggest ticket sellers in American boxing right now. And you can include Mayweather and Pacquiao in that because for the most part, Especially with Floyd, they've been fighting in Las Vegas casinos in front of about 15,000 fans because that's the capacity at the MGM Grand. Now, you look at the fight with Wade, Triple G just did over 16,000 at the Forum in Los Angeles, a sellout crowd. You look at the fight against Khan at the brand new T-Mobile Arena in Vegas, Canelo did over 16,000 tickets there. Not quite a sellout, but about 80% to capacity. You go back last year, the fight with David Lemieux that Golovkin had in New York in Madison Square Garden, sellout, 20,000 plus fans. Canelo fought James Kirkland in Houston at the baseball stadium there, did over 30,000 tickets. So these guys are both ticket sellers, and that's where K2 Promotions can come to the negotiating table with Golden Boy and say, look, we're not selling pay-per-view like you guys are, but we do have a fan base here. Our guy just signed a promotional deal with Nike. He's already got one with Apple. He's got one with Tecate. He's building a fan base. He sells out arenas on the East Coast, on the West Coast. So this ain't a 90-10 split kind of thing, okay? We are the B side, but it's not A and B minus, okay? It's A and B plus. Think about it that way. All that being said, K2 and Team Golovkin, they know they're the B side here. They know that to make this fight happen, they're gonna have to make concessions. And finances, the split of the revenue, is probably the biggest concession they're gonna have to make. But there's more, which brings me to my next category, catchweight. So fans and media have been talking about this Canelo weight thing, this 155-pound weight class that Canelo has essentially created over the past year or so. And he, in theory, wants to bring Golovkin down to 155 pounds. He'd like to do that if he could, but Golovkin's team has made it very, very clear the only guy they're going down in weight for would be Floyd Mayweather. You can read my piece in Boxing Monthly last month where they said straight up, all of them told me, Gennady, Abel Sanchez, and Tom Loeffler all told me, we'll go down to 154 for Floyd Mayweather because that's a huge fight for us. That's it. So here's where the negotiation gets tricky. You know, if Golden Boy says, look, we want it at 155, and K2 says no, well then this thing goes to purse bid. Then the split is 55-45. Then all of a sudden Team Golovkin might be open to going down to 155 because when you're getting potentially $10 million more dollars, what's a few more pounds? So they might call Golden Boy's bluff at that point. And if you're Golden Boy, do you take the fight at that point? Do you want to give up 45% of the purse or do you dump the belt? They'd probably dump the belt. So this catchweight thing, the weight is where I think we could really get stuck in negotiations for this fight, and where if it doesn't happen this year, it's probably going to be due to weight. In the end, again, K2 knows they're going to have to make concessions here, and I think they'd be willing to go down to 158 or so. Gennady Golovkin routinely weighs in 158, 159 for his fights. He's not a big middleweight. This is a guy that fought in the junior amateurs as a junior welterweight, not a very big guy. So I do think they'd be willing to meet somewhere in the middle, but 155 ain't happening. For those of you who are upset at the catchweight thing, I get it, but please understand, there is a precedent here. There have been middleweight, catchweight, big fights in the past. Go back to 2004, a dozen years ago. Oscar De La Hoya wanted a catchweight with Bernard Hopkins. They fought at 157 pounds. What's interesting about that is Oscar fought at 160 pounds in the fight previous to that against Felix Sturm, where many feel he got a gift decision victory to win the WBO title, and that became a unification thing. So there was a catchweight. Go back a few years, and Sergio Martinez and Paul Williams, their rematch, there was a catchweight there. So there have been catchweights throughout the history of boxing, especially big fights between an A side and a B side where egos get involved. Sometimes guys just want catchweights just to flex their promotional negotiation muscle a little bit. Look, Canelo Alvarez, he was the victim of a catchweight against Floyd Mayweather. He looked like a ghost. And I'm not just talking about his white skin, I'm talking about his face. He looked like an absolute ghost getting down to 152. So he's been a victim of it in the past when he was the B-side. Now it's his opportunity to inflict that on somebody else because he's the main man. So I get it. I understand your frustration, but they're a part of boxing, these catchweights, and it's probably going to happen here. Location. Location, location, location. This fight belongs in a stadium that can seat well over 50,000 fans. The best place for this fight would be at&t Stadium in Arlington, Texas, where the Dallas Cowboys of the NFL play. Jerry Jones, the owner of the team, the owner of that stadium, is a big boxing guy. You may remember he brought Manny Pacquiao down there twice, I think in 2011, against Joshua Clottey and Antonio Margarito. And I want to say for both of those fights, don't quote me, but I believe they did crowds of over 40,000, right? And that was the first boxing event in that venue. Jerry Jones was at Canelo-Con. He was there in T-Mobile Arena this past weekend. He wants to bring a Canelo-Golovkin fight down to that stadium. He invited Golovkin and K2 Promotions down there last year. They did a little tour of Texas. I already mentioned that Canelo has fought in Texas before. He did a massive crowd there. There is a big boxing fan base in Texas. This thing could work down there. You gotta figure it would do at least 80,000 ticket sales in that arena if they promoted it properly. Here's my concern. If the money demands from the fighters are too big, this fight could get pushed to Vegas. I talked about T-Mobile Arena. It does a capacity of about 20,000 fans. 20,000 tickets at T-Mobile Arena in Vegas would bring in a bigger gate than 80,000 tickets at at&t Stadium in Texas. As crazy as that sounds, it's true, and it's because the Vegas tickets cost so much more. I mentioned a few moments ago that both Canelo and Triple G did about 16,000 tickets in their last fight, their last respective fights, but Canelo's brought in a significantly higher gate because he was selling those tickets in Vegas, not Los Angeles. So there's a difference there. And my concern again is that the money demands, particularly from the Canelo side, he's used to getting 8 figures. He's going to want a massive payday to go up against Golovkin. Might push the fight to Vegas, and to me that would kind of ruin it a little bit. That's just one way that the powers that be in this situation could screw this thing up if they put it in the wrong venue in Vegas. It belongs in a stadium. This is a fight fans kind of fight. Another way they can screw this thing up is by overpricing it or by waiting too long, which takes me to my last point, the Mayweather-Pacquiao effect. Stop yelling. I know, I'm beating a dead horse, but guys, it's true. The Mayweather-Pacquiao thing last May, that debacle, that dud, that money grab really, really hurt the sport in so many ways. And if you think about it, they did over 4 million pay-per-view buys for that fight. And the subsequent fights with Mayweather with Berto and Pacquiao with Bradley did less than 1/10 of that. Over 90% of the people that tuned in for that fight said fuck boxing ever since. That's not good for this sport if we want it to continue to thrive, especially in the United States. And the powers that be seem to understand that. I was up in Vegas during fight week for Canelo-Con. I was ringside for the event. I was hanging out at the post-fight press conference. Just being in town and being around the media and the fighters and the promoters all week, there was a sense among people, because obviously everyone was talking about the Golovkin fight. That's what they were pressuring Canelo about. There was a sense among people that we can't screw this up. The Mayweather-Pacquiao thing cannot happen again. Now, I say all that, and I realize that fans want this fight right now, but it can sit on the shelf until next year. If some sort of agreement could be made between K2 and Golden Boy where Canelo dumps the belt, dumps the WBC belt for now, and Golovkin is promoted to full champion, and they take an interim bout the second half of this year, and then they agree to fight next May, and they write it into a contract. something where there's a storyline, there's an ending, there's a beginning, middle, and end for boxing fans to follow, I think it'll be okay. But if these two don't fight by the end of next year, by September of 2017, this thing will no longer be marinating. It'll be spoiled. It'll be rotting. It'll be heading Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao territory. And fans are not gonna fall for that again. They sure as hell ain't gonna fall for that again at $100 a pop. So if this thing happens, they can't screw it up. It's gotta happen within the next year or so. It's gotta be at the right catch weight, the right venue, and the right pricing. No $100 price tag. It's gotta make sense for fans. Last but not least, I get a sense from the brass at Golden Boy that putting on a big event like Canelo-Golovkin that could potentially do probably at least 2 million pay-per-view buys and at least 60, 70,000 fans at the right stadium, in a way could outperform Mayweather-Pacquiao in terms of putting more butts in the seats, turning on more fans, being a better fight for the fans, and building more fans. That would be a way that Golden Boy Promotions could stick it to Al Heyman. Go back a couple of years. Al Heyman, Richard Schaefer really did Golden Boy dirty. They pulled a fast one on them, left them for dead, left them lying in the street for dead. Golden Boy Promotions has made a huge comeback. And really, they've been the best American promoter in the last couple of years because they've listened to the fans. They've been putting on fights the fans want to see. They've had their ears to the street, right? And they've been listening to what the fans want. They've gotten into the streaming technology, which is the future of this sport. They're the only major promoter in the United States that have gotten into it that far. They just offered streaming for their last pay-per-view fight, Canelo Khan. They've streamed free fight cards multiple times for fans. They're doing what the fans want, and this would be the ultimate test for them. And it would be a way to get back at Heyman, who left them for dead. Had this mass exodus of fighters when he went over and did his whole PBC thing. If they could do this fight, and it ends up being a close competitive fight, which I actually think it would be, it could possibly warrant a rematch, a rubber match. Who knows? You could possibly have a real rivalry building right here between these two fighters who are in their prime. That would be a way to outdo what Heyman and Arum did with the whole Mayweather-Pacquiao debacle. So I really, really think Golden Boy Promotions will do the right thing here. Maybe not right now, but pretty soon. That's the straight dope on Canelo-Golovkin. Let me know what you guys think. Comment below, like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys at the fights. Hopefully at Canelo-Golovkin.